Princess didn't want me. MSC didn't want me. P&O agreed to take me in, but only if I agreed to board my least favourite of all their ships. Well, a bad day on a half-inflated life raft is better than the best day on land. So I sucked it up and I said thank you very much to a last-minute emergency cruise on Iona. Deep breath. Here, ladies and gentlemen, we go. Oh, there it is. When Princess bumped me due to overbooking, I booked a recovery cruise on MSC. I didn't really want it, as I've already got a booking for Virtuosa, but I woke up the following day to find out that they didn't want me either. Somehow, that cruise was also overbooked, and they cancelled on me. Nothing else was available sailing from the UK. The only feasible fly cruises looked like an absolute mission of flights and trains and crossing my fingers, which left me with two options. Wait for next month's cruise on Ventura, or take an emergency two-nighter on Iona. Like a starving man being offered a corned beef sandwich, I would never have chosen it, but I accepted gratefully, because the alternative was sweet FA. This won't really be a review of the ship as per my usual Cruisetubes, as it was a high-speed, short-duration, last-minute emergency trip. I'll just tell you how it went. I took a trip on Iona late last year. Full disclosure, I hated it. It had been years since my last trip on P&O, and the reality of Iona was significantly different to my memories of old P&O. I've retrospectively softened to it. The market's changed and so has P&O's place in it. I should have realised when the cost of the trip was less than half that of a similar trip 15 years earlier. Everything else has rocketed in price. I mean, look at the price of Freddos. Only an idiot wouldn't realise that something had changed. And to me, stage left. Other than Manuel Martinez, who is objectively dire, I think my disappointment may have been more to do with my expectations than my experience. And as I clicked book now, I had that smug, I'm being the bigger person and giving you a second chance feeling. Of course, a millisecond later, I went cold, as the reality of what a two-nighter on Iona, going literally nowhere, was likely to be. Lads, stags, hens. I had a terrible premonition of the pink glitter cowboy hats, inflatable men and blow-up winkies, and chubby dudes called Gazza or Stevo staggering around in a wedding dress that I strongly suspected were in my immediate future. I hassled the lady at Link's parking yet again, and much like a man on death row, I got my affairs in order. A couple of days later, I rolled into Southampton with a backpack on one shoulder and a chip on the other. In the hours since booking, my gratitude had turned to dread. As I eyed the enormous queue at Embarkation, I felt a pang of relief. Sure, there was one drunken loser wearing a pirate hat, but the hungover cast of The Walking Dead that I anticipated did not seem to have arrived yet. It was a very long queue of very normal-looking human mans and womans. Very short cruises are all advertised as being a taster cruise, but we all know that, Cunard aside, where taster can be replaced with snooze, the real phrase is booze cruise. 2 nights on a ship going nowhere is always likely to be a ship full of people trying to beat the drinks package. But as I looked up and down the lines, I dared to dream. These looked like people who didn't understand the code and had foolishly booked a taster cruise as a taster cruise. For some reason, Embarkation had been delayed. Presumably a stowaway or some iceberg damage that needed repairing. Most people realised that the ship won't leave without us, and they just lined up neatly by the row that had their boarding time written on it. One charmer in the queue next to mine started being incredibly aggressive and rude to a sweet older lady working at the terminal. She was a bit flustered, trying to keep everyone organised and placated, and she was visibly shook by him. So I called her over and I quite loudly said, "You are doing a lovely job. It must be really difficult. Don't worry, if that idiot pipes up again, I'm going to damage him so badly that travel insurance has not yet been invented that is comprehensive enough to take on the job of rebuilding him." As is often the way when I speak to civilians out in the wild, she wasn't really sure if I was joking or not, and sort of mumbled a thanks before scurrying away. I was joking, and I was also deadly serious. The couple that I'd been chatting to in the queue started wondering aloud if he would pipe up again or not. He didn't. It was around about now that I spotted Walk With Me Tim joining the queue. No Casper or Gabby though, I don't think. Anyway, if you want a more sensible review of this particular sailing, keep an eye on his channel. About an hour later than anticipated, I was on the escalator up to check-in. I meandered through security and zipped up the gangway. With everyone boarding late, the place was pretty busy, so before I did anything else, I dragged my rucksack up 8 flights of stairs to deck 14 and I found my cabin. Lucky you! Here is my first ever cabin tour. Sofa for sitting, bed for sleeping, TV if you get bored, you can shower in here and you can poop on there. I mean, if that doesn't prove that YouTube cabin tours are 19.5 minutes of waffle and 30 seconds of tour, then I don't know what does. Okay, let's get all the admin done. I grabbed my key card and I set off to find my muster station. When I got to deck 8, I realised I hadn't bothered to check where my muster station was. I went to the first one that I saw and I asked, "Can you help me please? I'm too stupid to have checked. Can you tell me where G is?" The South African crew member at the station told me this was G. I won't do the voice. It's in the entrance to the Quays, FYI. And now that I knew where to go in an emergency, everything was okay. Now, a normal person would have said thank you and gone about their day. But this was me, so I said, listen, you know and I know that in the event of an emergency, literally nobody is following the muster procedure. Every single one of these people will lose their mind and trample over their own grandmothers to save themselves. He sort of agreed and said it had been exactly like that when he'd been on board a ship and the 7 short and 1 long had sounded. We did some chit chat and it turned out that he was a shoppee and he'd actually been working on Aurora shortly before I was there, and he knew about half the staff that I worked with. He also spoke very highly of a shoppee named Robbie, and in a remarkable example of personal growth, I just nodded my head, rather than telling him all the reasons that he was wrong and why Robbie was awful. Don't worry though, you'll find all about Robbie in a future Aurora Tales. As I was there anyway, I thought I'd grab a bite to eat at the Quays. But after about 5 minutes of staring at the back of the same head in a queue that wasn't moving, I gave up, and I braced myself while climbing 8 flights of stairs for the horrors that no doubt would be waiting for me in the buffet. It wasn't actually as dreadful as I'd expected, and whilst it was, bustling, it wasn't really crammed. Having said that, the serving counters looked a bit post-apocalypse, so I was probably just a bit late. I picked some salad, then when no other protein seemed to be available anymore, I did the British at a buffet and made a sausage salad. I enjoyed the majestic view of Southampton in the drizzle through the buffet window. I sank a couple of OK buffet coffees, and I headed out like Attenborough to explore this new world. It seemed like as soon as I took my plate away, the buffet horde got their second wind and it was jammed again. Iona's just had a refit, and as far as I can tell, that's consisted of scrubbing a few carpets and sticking this screen up in the Skydome. My trip on Iona last year taught me that the Skydome is not for me. I don't enjoy lounging by a pool, or standing in one, pretending it's big enough to swim in and also pretending that I'm having a good time. And the shows they put on up here, they're well, avant-garde. They're still doing silent discos up here and I assume the bizarre shows, but they've also started sticking normal human singers up here too, which has got to be an improvement. I had an aimless wander around deck 6, 7 and 8, and it was busy. I was still pleased that there was no massive stag or hen do's around and all the people seemed normal. But there was a lot of them scurrying around. It's hard to know exactly how I feel about the Atrium on Iona. You'll have heard lots of people say it's like being in an airport lounge, because, it is. Some of the speciality dining venues are dotted around it, and they don't really seem all that special, because you got people weaving in and out between the tables, using the place as a thoroughfare. It's very bright, to the point of being a bit more like an interrogation than a holiday, and the chrome railings on the stairs make it look like it wants to be MSC. Imagine that. But at the same time, the huge windows are mesmerising. I'd be interested to do something like a Fjords or Alaska cruise on Iona, or Arvia. It'd be great setting up camp with a coffee and just seeing what there was to see. By now, it was dinner time. And I'm old, so I prefer traditional early or late sittings, but Iona is all freedom dining. I went on the Not app and booked myself a table for one in Pearl. Now Pearl is the bottom half of the massive dining room at the back of the ship on deck 6 and 7. P&O and some guests pretend that they're two separate restaurants. I ordered the 3 pay extra dishes in the blue box on the menu. The starter was picky bits like mums make as soon as they see a bit of sun, and it was okay, bit of a weird combo. The main course was rocking, I really enjoyed it, even though I accidentally did a Pretty Woman and launched one of my prawns across the room. Don't worry, nobody saw. If you have all 3 pay extra courses, then essentially you get the pudding for 5p, which honestly I feel is a bit overpriced. I'm a fairly BB, so after dinner I went to the theatre for the show. Sons of Pitches, an a cappella trio making music without instruments. Essentially, a bit like Officer Jones from Police Academy, if he were 3 white dudes and couldn't actually do the beatboxing and sound effects. This was dreadful. I was wondering for a moment what would make the main guy call himself a singer, but then I remembered what most beauticians look like, and, well, you don't have to be German to catch German measles, do you? A fairly steady stream of people walked out over the 45 minutes or so. I stayed because I was trying to capture one of the really big note misses on camera. And it got to the point where I and the people around me couldn't help but laugh every time the singer took a vocal axe to another lyric. As they geared up for the big finish, I felt myself being a little bit jealous of deaf people. As I joined the slow shuffle through the casino to escape, I heard the karaoke in Brodies, so I wandered in to have a look. Now, this wasn't professional singing, but neither was the professional singing that I just sat through. When a civilian can even half sing, it's always amazing. After this dude, normal service was resumed. This woman, who absolutely cannot sing, started screaming down the mic with whatever words and time she felt like, as karaoke should be. In keeping with my former professional athlete and current professional eater status, I did my usual daily 5k of prom laps before heading up to the buffet for late night snacks. Like all the top athletes, midnight pizza and Cornish pasty was the pick of the day. I drank the last of my coffee and I went to the machine around 20 feet away for another. I was surprised / disgusted to find upon my return around 60 seconds later that these disgraceful people had decided to use my plate to get rid of their used tea bag. At first I sort of laughed and I asked them, "Did you think I wasn't coming back?" But Wayne and Waynetta Slob pretended not to hear me and just ignored me. And as a deeply childish man, this irritated me. So I continued very loudly. You probably didn't see my jacket hung over the back of the chair." No response. "I imagine you thought I wasn't coming back to pick up the £1,000 phone and £600 camera right next to the plate that you've just used as a bin." Still nothing. "You probably couldn't see me when I was all the way over there at that coffee machine, directly in your line of sight." They ignored that too. That was the point when I just stood up in front of them, said "Smile," and took this lovely picture. They didn't say a word, but as you can see, I think they noticed it was happening. Now, I'm a 42-year-old man who believes in facts, science and proof, so obviously I do not believe in ghosts. But how else can you explain this service panel door opening and closing all on its own as I walked back to my cabin. Do 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 do. The ghost didn't get me, so I made it back to 14530 to find that my cabin steward had put the twin beds back to the big boy bed that I had requested. I made a coffee and, in a very rare move, I sat out on the balcony with it. It was at this point I started lamenting my decision to buy Wi-Fi for the full 2-day trip when I got on board, only to see that we hadn't moved yet and I could have just used my data and saved £20. Still, good news about the bed. I was up early to use the gym. I don't know what time it was. Early enough to be dark outside, but late enough that the bars were closed and the drunks were sleeping it off. Iona has a really good gym. Plenty of cardio kit, including my favourite curved runners, a wee studio, a modest selection of dumbbells, some benches, bars and plates, a few of those wire pulley machines that you only ever see old folks using, and a good range of bugger resistance machines. Like every ship in the universe, it's all techno gym. Quick shower. Now the shower curtain didn't stick to me for 2 reasons. 1, Iona has glass shower doors. 2, I'm a full-grown adult man who knows how to wash himself. Then it was down to Aqua for my 8 AM breakfast reservation. Breakfast was good, although it did take 45 minutes to arrive, and they forgot my bacon. I bashed out my 5k on prom-deck, then I dropped into the hangar for a coffee. Now this coffee was better than any that I had here last time I was on board. You know why? That chair there is where Manuel Martinez would set up camp with his laptop every day. What's that? Why not sit somewhere else? Because once I've chosen a seat, well, that is my seat. Obs. As this was a 48-hour or less cruise going literally nowhere, I wandered along to the 4-screen onboard cinema. I watched F1, Brad Pitt being Brad Pitt / Rocky in a car, and I've seen it before, but it's good cheesy fun. And I'd rather sit through Sons of Pictures again than watch the Robert Williams movie. Then I hauled my creaky old bones up the stairs to deck 17, 18 and 19. It was weird weather, lovely and warm, but horribly windy and raining most of the time. Of course, this is a ship full of English people, so sunbathing in the wind and rain did not bother them. The pools and hot tubs were all well used, not by me, and there were 10 different games going on at once in the sports court. I was reminded just how wild booze cruises are on my way back to the Skydome as I passed what I assume were grandparents and grandchildren playing giant chess. The Skydome was much less feral than my previous visit, and I decided to grab a snack from Taste 360, which is the poolside grill. I went for a bit of a meze of cheap crap, and it was all exactly as you'd expect. The type of rubbish that you'd buy at Waterworld or Alton Towers, which is fine. That's what poolside grills are. Although, the burger in particular was actually really good. My next stop was at the Limelight Club for an art lecture. Now when I say lecture, obviously I mean shameless misrepresentation of the stuff they sell in the gallery, in an attempt to flog a few pieces. I don't know when or what the last event in here was, but there were dirty glasses left on the tables. I think that was the main thing that put me off buying a print of a picture that I don't like by an artist that nobody cares about. It was a pleasant enough way to pass half an hour, but it really irritated me when the art consultant disingenuously gushed over how lucky we were to have a Banksy Princess Diana £10 note on board, as they are so super duper rare. Now, I've been on 5 ships so far this year, and every one of them has been flogging one. I had lunch at the Olive Grove, and that's a sort of Mediterranean restaurant. The decor was a bit, I don't know, garden centre / Amdram theatre set. I went for the trio of starters, which included 5 starters, then a lasagna. I didn't bother with pudding because I'm healthy and I was already full of burgers and cheap fish fingers. I overcame my Manuel Martinez PTSD and I wandered through the clubhouse. It was a bit weird. There was a lady on the wee stage bit singing, and she was good, very pleasant. But I don't know why she was bothering. There was almost nobody in there. Still, I saw a few singers dotted around the ship over the 2 days and they were all decent. Certainly better than me, or Sons of Pitches. because I'm old and I was away on a ship, I went back to my cabin for a coffee and a nap before getting glammed up for formal night. You should have seen me. I looked delicious. I booked chef's table for formal night. Now, the way it's described, and what some cruisetubers will tell you, might make you think that it's just people looking overdressed and a bit of the buffet with some tablecloths. But actually, well, that is what it is. I used my wee voucher for a glass of elderflower press and I pretended to look at the menu, despite already knowing that I'll be having the French onion soup, beef Wellington and a cheese plate. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that good food will elevate the buffet with tablecloth atmosphere and it will still feel like something really special. I dare say that it might have done. When the waiter asked me how the soup was, I said that it was as good as the one that I made at home. "Oh, were you a good chef?" he asked. "Nope." "Oh dear," and he cleared the table. After the main course, he said, "As good as the one that you make?" "Yep." "Oh dear," he said again. They didn't have the cheese plate for whatever reason, so I had the chocolate delice. The desserts on Iona are really poor. As far as I can tell, they're made from gelatin and empty calories. Not a fan. The soup and beef were okay, but certainly not a treat. The soup was a bit gloopy, the crouton was soggy and the cheese was burnt on. The beef Wellington was basically a pretentious Greggs and I didn't eat most of the pudding. Next up, back to headliners for the show. This time, the ship's company doing a production called Festival. It's a sort of faux Glastonbury / Grease-like story about a load of div young things having a romance around some portaloos. I know it sounds stupid complaining about the musical theatreiness of a musical theatre production. The pop song should be poppy, and the rock song should be rocky. It's sort of weird doing chart music in the style of Michael Ball. There was a real highlight though about halfway through when two of them duet and then immediately after that there's a clubbing scene. Obviously, I managed to get neither of them on film. Anyway, it was a solid 7 out of 10 and I enjoyed it. I don't drink and I've got no friends, so I went for a coffee and then I had one last wander around the ship. I must have been walking for quite a while because it was only when I noticed that the ship was empty that I thought I'd better hit the sack. Once again, I braved the ghost corridor, packed up my wee suitcase to self-disembark in the morning, and I fell asleep watching Sweet Natured and Travelling Light on YouTube. I woke up early enough for a wee gym session before breakfast, and I hit the keys for a rockin' omelette starter, followed by my own patented and top secret recipe breakfast pizza for mains. Power slammed 4 orange juice and 4 black coffees, and I hit the road before most people were out of bed. Less than 48 hours on Iona was not my first choice for this month's trip, or my second or third, come to that, and once it was booked, the dread of what a 2-nighter going nowhere might actually be really gave me the fear. But it turned out to be way better than I feared. There were children, but none feral and unsupervised. There were people drinking, sure, but nobody made me want to throw them overboard, and I didn't see a single pink glitter cowboy hat or an inflatable winky. Other cruise ships spotted? 1. MSC Poesia, or other name if that's not how you say it. Duck spotted? 0. Pineapple spotted? I am sorry to say, 1. The first one I've ever seen out in the wild. The money. 2 nights on Iona, solo and a standard balcony cabin was £464. Link's Parking didn't charge any fees for swapping dates around from Princess to MSC to P&O, and they refunded the difference, so parking was $46.95. It was too late to book discounted Wi-Fi, so 2 days better Wi-Fi cost £40. No speciality dining, but I did buy 3 upcharge dishes in the MDR, which was $16.95. The only drinks I bought outside of meal times was 4 coffees, which was £21, and that gives us a grand total of $571.95 or $285.97 per night. Without half-term dazzers, shazzers, dazettes and shazzettes, and without Manuel Martinez or bizarre dome shows, maybe Iona isn't that bad after all. I've since booked a week on board in February, so I'll give it the full cruise tube and decide for sure. FYI, no Manuels were harmed in the making of this cruise tube. I mean, I had the motive and intention, but not the opportunity. Until then, An emergency 2-nighter on Iona. Done.